Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Rod Reasen, who's the CEO of Springbuk, a health intelligence company. Rod, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Hey, so I really want to dive in deep and learn more about Springbuk because I know you. It's a really deep and analytical, obviously, approach. So we want to make sure that we learn how we maximize the most valuable asset that companies have, which is people. So we want to jump into that, but give us a little bit of your background and then talk about your entrepreneurial journey. I always find that intriguing to see what led someone to the field that they're currently in.
Sure. So, the entrepreneurial journey is always one that's fun to talk about, and I seem to tell the story a bit different each time, or it could go long, it could go short, but we'll try to keep it pretty tight. I think one of the unique things is I've never had a W-2 from a company that I either didn't start or the W-2 was a form of a draw against commission. Yeah. With the exception of detasseling corn and working in a grocery store when I was just a kid. So my dad was a factory worker, 32 years, machine repairman, lifted tubes when we used to sell tube TVs in the U.S. Oh, yeah. And on the side, he would buy and sell cars. So I'd learned a little bit of my entrepreneurial kind of teachings just in practice, watching my dad buy a car for $50 or $100 or $500 and then turn around and sell it for a couple $1,000 and learned that practice. And I was intrigued even as a young kid, really preteen and throughout my teenage years, and started doing that myself. And then, you just start to learn that, man, I can make money here doing this that's a lot more predictable and easier to access, and maybe even not as much hard work than going and making an hourly rate. So I would say that the bone was started or touched pretty early in my journey. So went to college, got out of college, and started to do financial planning, and that was when I had my first draw. So I was on W-2 for 3 months. My boss said, "Here, we're going to give you $4,500, and you can choose to take that all in 1 month or spread it out over 3 months or 6 months, however, but it's $4,500. And when you start making commission, you have to pay back that $4,500." It was a draw. And that was literally the only salary that I had ever been on for any company that, I'd been associated with. So grew a pretty successful financial planning practice, and started to meet with a lot of business owners and high net worth folks as we were trying to get them to invest, with me, and just started to see, man, there's a world of opportunity here to be in business for myself. And while I was doing financial planning, it really wasn't the same journey as starting your own thing. So ventured out on my own, creating my own financial planning practice, eventually drifted over into the group benefits space, becoming a benefit consultant. That's a whole story of its own. And then in 2010, had an opportunity to sell both of those companies to a publicly traded, and ultimately made that decision that was the right thing for us to do, and for my wife and I, and we did. So spent the next 3 years trying to decide what it is that I wanted to do. Spent a month in Africa, went up to South Sudan, spent a week and a half there, looked at missions, looked at buying a franchise, just looked at a bunch of different things, just in that exploration mode of what do I do next? And ultimately, after talking with quite a few advisors and friends, decided, hey, I really do enjoy this journey of finding a problem, building a solution, and then building a team to go execute on that vision. And so started that journey in 2013 is when the ideation started to happen. By 2014, we raised a little bit of investment capital. And in 2015, we officially launched Springbuk, which was really designed to take all of this big data that the employers have access to and use it in a much more machine learning, software-driven way so that they could get at not just pictures of their data in the form of graphs and charts, but actually get to the intelligence side of here's what you do about it. That was the vision, and now we're sitting with multiple Fortune 100 customers, nearly 4,000 total employers on the platform, and our mission has been to prevent disease with data, which is a differentiation in the market from many of the pure data analytics solutions today.
Yeah, I think that last phrase is pretty powerful, preventing disease with data, and definitely want to dive into that. The thing that I find curious is, and maybe this is part of what you'll talk about. It's one thing to know the data and have it at your fingertips, but then you got to do something with it. So you might be able to show a company or show some analytics of, look at all this stuff, but then what? So talk a little bit about how to prevent disease with data, and then how to make sure that those ahas in the data become implemented.
Well, I'll start at the true macro lens, because most people, when you start to talk about healthcare, they think of the care piece of health, and they think of doctors, physicians, hospital systems, pharmacy. They think of that side of care. But most people divorce the fact that care has to be paid for in some fashion, and we do that through various components of co-pays, deductibles, and even insurance. So break out for a second. Let me just break out and help your listeners understand that healthcare in the United States is by its nature very perverse, because the buyer and the seller are not aligned to necessarily deliver value. So from a first principles or Freakonomics lens, your buyer really doesn't want to acquire or use care. They just don't. You and I, as human beings, don't want to have to go to the doctor. We want the doctor to be there if we need it. But our desire as human beings is to be healthy and not have to use a physician office, right? So it's pretty logical. On the other side of care, though, those that deliver a product called care, they absolutely want us in the system buying or using as much care as possible, because that's how they get paid. So at the first principles perspective, healthcare is broken because they're perversely incentivized against each other. So that was the lens that we saw as we started to investigate the space, and we said, okay, well, if you break it down a layer, then who are the buyers and who are the deliverers? And then in the United States, it's predominantly three segments. You have government in the form of Medicare, Medicaid. You have employers that purchase a big swath. Almost 50% of all healthcare is purchased by employers through a commercial insured plan. And then you have the individuals, which is a very small segment. And then only a small piece of that is paid for by you and I with office copays and deductibles and so on. Mm-hmm. So we said, okay, what if we could deliver data that could actually transform this perverse relationship and create a much more symbiotic relationship where there's a win-win in the overall delivery of care? And that was the idea. And we said, well, let's at the root, let's use this data to prevent disease, which is the ultimate goal of humanity, is to not have to use care. So that's how we approached it. And that may be too big and theoretical, or maybe it's too altruistic, but ultimately that's what we want. So that was our desire when actually building this company, was to use data so that we could help the buyer understand how they make the best investment in their people, that people asset that you mentioned, and then deliver that information over to the care side of delivery and do it in the most efficient way possible so that you could have a much more clean handshake along the way.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you're mentioning that it's like, our healthcare system in reality is not healthcare, it's sick care, because you typically don't access any of the system until you're sick.
No doubt.
So what does your data do to allow for, your premise that we want to prevent disease with data? How does data prevent disease?
Okay, this is where I start to step on toes, but let's and I'm speaking in generalities, very macro lens, and I'll just caveat this by saying that not everybody is perversely incentivized. If you sit down with any physician who went into the medical practice, certainly there was probably a sense of, hey, I think this is an occupation that I can make good money at, but they typically had an altruistic bone in them that said, I want to do this so I can help people. So I don't want to paint a negative lens there that delivery is bad. It just, we need to make sure that there's proper alignment. So what our system does is we use a software product that we created, and we use algorithms that we've created, about 80 or so of our own proprietary algorithms, to go find areas in the population where there's either inefficiency in that need and delivery, or there's opportunity to highlight that a person needs to engage in care, but they're not. So those are both general. Let me give you a specific one as an example. I'll use spinal surgeries because it's a pretty hot topic right now with working from anywhere. I'm sitting in my attic. We've all sat on plenty of Zoom calls, and thank you for not making me do another Zoom call today.
But you didn't have to comb your hair.
Well, that's funny because I'm shave my head every day. But anyway, just as you're thinking about this, I just rolled my chair over in front of my computer. When I do a Zoom call, I typically sit forward in my chair so that my photo or my picture can be framed appropriately in the camera. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also looking at the people that are on that screen. Well, by nature, what I've just done is I put myself into a very bad posture situation. And many of you, like me, have probably gotten through a day and had absolute video fatigue, where your eyes hurt, your face hurts from trying to smile all day, and your neck and back hurt because you are, positioning your body in a place that it's not intended to. So all that to say, that is one example that spinal surgeries have started to pop up. Neck and back issues, MSK, broader as a topic. So for instance, if that's an issue and you take that issue into a physician, what often will happen is that surgery starts to become an option. On that pathway, if you think about that from a linear timeline, nobody wants to have to go have spinal surgery, but yet if you're in pain, you want that resolved. So what we do is we use that data to watch the pathway of an individual and say, hey, alert, there's a problem here. If this person continues on this trajectory, there's going to be this thing that happens called surgery. It's expensive, it's invasive. If we can actually avoid that, we can help both the individual not have to go through that really invasive nature of surgery, but we can also potentially save a lot of money by doing so. So what are the alternative paths? Data gives us the ability to have that early radar system in the human being so that we can avoid unnecessary care or avoid situations that create potential complications down the road. Does that help?
100%. And I think that it kind of ties in what I mentioned about healthcare versus sick care, and when a company can use this type of analytics to get ahead of the curve. It's kind of like Wayne Gretzky saying, "I don't skate where the puck is, I skate where it's going," because you need to get there when the puck's going to get there. So if you can get ahead of things, now you are serving your employees, making sure the human element is taken care of, but also there's a monetary savings there, and that's not a bad thing for a company either to experience while they're doing good for people.
Absolutely. You just mentioned a term that we use all the time. I mean, our business is about doing good, and it's a part of our culture. It's part of who we are. It's part of why we try to attract people that also are altruistically believe in the mission, is that our business does good by humanity. You're right in that care, there are a ton of data and analytics companies that focus on once a person enters the medical system, what do we do about them? And that's great. We do that too. It's a piece of what we do. We need to make sure that once a person is captured inside of the medical system, there is a need. We need to deliver the most efficient pathway of care possible. But my goodness, I mean, there is so much more opportunity to catch people before they go into the system. Unfortunately, it's just not how the economics are set up in the United States. We're not rewarded to keep people out of the system as a system, but we are individually, and employers absolutely are, because it's their dollar. It's a loss of productivity in the human being. And that's why we focused on the employer initially out of the gate, was that they had the biggest reason to invest in this type of product.
So talk a little bit about what it takes for, what size employer, because like, for instance, hey, that sounds great. My 5 employees would really benefit from that. Well, I'm certain that this, would need to have a certain level of employees. So what type of organizations do you work with? And then what's the process? I mean, from, is it just as simple as we come in and connect up software to your cloud and then we start running? But what does that look like to get things up and running if they see the vision?
I will try to simplify this answer as much as possible. Most of our employers are self-funded, so you're typically looking at an employer that is 100 employees and above. That's not always the case. Most of our employers are in the multiple thousands. We serve employers from the Fortune 25 all the way through the middle market. But it's typically a self-funded employer. So you're talking about a company that has a couple hundred employees. The data, most employers don't have their own data. It sits at the insurance carrier. So you can think of the Blues. We usually say the BUCAs as a short, but the United Healthcares and Aetna's, Cigna's, Blue Crosses of the world. They would have claims data, and we can consume that claims data, and then we run our algorithms and our software on that information. We also pair that with pharmacy data and a whole host of other information, like social determinants of health or SDOH data and other things. That all runs through what we call our health intelligence engine. And on average, when we go live with an employer, we're showing in our insights engine $1,000 worth of potential savings per employee per year on day one. That's the relevance. So there is immediate action items that can be had by the employer if they want to take those next steps. And
I think when someone can hear the number $1,000 per employee from day one, that's pretty astounding. And I would venture to say that the use case of being able to say, if your organization is this many employees and from day one, what does day 2 and beyond look like? So for instance, once the algorithm continues working, what happens in month 6 and 12 and 18? Does that 1,000 grow?
This is, populations are not static, and you and I as human beings are not static. So in any population, you have turnover, you have new people coming in, people that are exiting, and then you also have new conditions that are happening literally on a minute-by-minute basis. So the algorithms are really designed to continue to be this ongoing radar system of the population to allow you to have an aggregate, what do you want to do, or where can you invest the most for the biggest dollar return? I'll give you an example. We used MSK as this potential issue. It's a really, really hot topic right now. There are a bunch of vendors in that space, and employers are often bombarded, specifically the HR teams, are often bombarded by all of these new digital therapeutics and solution vendors that say, I can help you with, and put whatever with in that blank. MSK is one of those. What the employers need to understand is, hey, this isn't just popular or cool, or the company down the street or my friend in HR just did this. What they need to do is match up the solution with the problem. And that's where our solution starts to become very, very powerful, is we help you understand the biggest problems with the biggest potential opportunity so that you can marry that with the vendor to go then solve the problem. It's not that difficult when you think about it.
Okay, so that makes me now think of the question of, hey, if I need to build a website and I don't know who to call, I might go to a certain website like an Upwork, where I could look for a bunch of freelancers and review them and go, ooh, that one looks good, I'm going to hire them. So that platform becomes a connector. So what you're telling me is this will find data and present opportunities, but then what's the solution? So do you also have, our recommended solution would be, and then here's this list of providers?
We don't. Our thesis was, let's remain agnostic in the space, and let's provide the information and not soil it by picking winners and losers, because I believe that there will constantly be innovation in that space. And to pick the best innovator today, they may not be the next best innovator in the future. So what we've done is we've created a platform that allows for easy integration with those vendors. We can pass information along to them through proper HIPAA, controlled channels. And then we can bring data back and measure, did the vendor do its job correctly? We also work hand in hand with the broker consultant that's typically working with that HR person so that they can understand what they should be suggesting. It's not as simple as saying MSK is an issue, you need to pick, XYZ vendor in the space. There are a lot of other things that go on, and that's where the consultant comes in. And that is our distribution models to work directly with the consultants.
Yeah, and so I think that right there helps close the loop, so it's not just, oh, look at this opportunity. Well, now we're providing a conduit for the consultant so that the solution can be accessed. I think that's spectacular, and I think it really is. It kind of, you think of the old cliche these days, the 30,000 foot view is, well, you're really taking a 60,000 foot view. In reality, you're taking health intelligence from a broad level down to the company level, and then helping them realize, ooh, here's the opportunity, here's the solution. That conduit becomes something that really is a powerful tool to make a difference in people's lives. I just think that's such an intelligent solution.
Well, thank you. The future of healthcare is what I would call hyper-specialization. And it's no different than you and I. We see this happen as consumers every single day. And if it's a bit freaky, actually, but just go home tonight and talk to your wife about taking a vacation to the Cayman Islands, and then go online, and what are you going to see? Ads for vacations to the Cayman Islands. It's not really freaky. We understand how that works. It's just, microphones listening to your voice and using that information to create hyper-specialization. Healthcare has been trying to get there. Solutions like us allow that to be able to happen at scale. That is probably, I get goosebumps every time I talk about it, because we see the potential of what is next in healthcare over the next 5 years, and it's dramatic. Preventing disease with data is not a dream. It's an absolute reality.
Well, I think that's just spectacular. And Rod, I really appreciate you coming on today. What's the best way that someone listening could reach out and learn more about Springbuk?
Well, our website's the best spot. So www.springbuk.com.
Rod, thanks a million for coming on. It was really great chatting with you today.
Well, thanks for having me on.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.